Welcome to this session focused on the theme of future of work. My name is Roberta Bigliani, and I have the pleasure in IDC Europe to be responsible and managing industry research, but also the future of work practice that we created a few years ago. If you move to the next slide, I would like to basically share with you in the next 10-15 minutes for suggestion, for strategy that you could consider to basically deploy the next work experience. And those strategies are focused on four elements. The first one being the workspaces, the second one being talent, the third, trust, and last but not least, a significant change in the organizational culture. If we move to the next slide, we can start with the first of these dimensions, the workspaces. And when I'm talking about workspaces, I would like you not to think just to the physical environment of an office or your home office due to COVID, or co-working spaces that that are becoming popular. I really would like you to think about the entire framework, the infrastructure that is digital and physical, in which we will be working with hybrid models. And it is very important to focus on intelligent and agile workspaces, because there are benefits related to that. And in fact, if you think about the data that are presented in this slide, we are measuring and we are expecting to measure a significant increase, even 30% of increases in productivity, a decrease in the turnover, and also higher revenues per employees for companies that are really implementing those type of workspaces compared to their peers. And if we move to the next slide, we can see the typical consequences of inflexible work environment. How many of us has to deal with, and you see the percentage from our surveys, with an efficient and still too manual processes, one company after two at least, or difficulties in communicating and collaborating with your colleagues, and also difficulties in understanding the entire processes in which your activity is fitting. And of course, the difficulties in relating, not just with the colleagues inside the company, but with all the external stakeholders and people you have to collaborate. And this translates into a lot of issues when you think about your day-to-day activity in terms of time spent in looking for the right information, or time spent in switching between different applications that are needed to go through one series of tasks. And again, if you think that one company after two say that they spent an enormous amount of time in finding the document, you can understand why it's so important to basically look for a different kind of environment. And if we go to the next slide, we see probably the three pillars that we have to think about when we have to design agile and intelligent workspaces. We need to put the people, the employee, the workers, being a field workers or an office worker, a knowledge worker, or any kind of type of person, in the sort of position where it can really develop and produce the outcome of what is supposed to do. And it is very, very important to provide a person with the data, but data that are put in the context of the activity that needs to be done. Because if not, there is an effort in understanding the data rather than doing the right activity. And we have to think about ways of augmenting the capabilities, the physical, but also the cognitive capabilities of workers, so that they are enabled and empowered when they are doing executing their process. And last but not least, we need to think about how to enable an agile working type of methodology with forming teams, forming to basically fix and deliver what is the priorities that the company is having in that very moment. And this is very important in a context that is so fluid like the one we are living today. In the next slide, you can see the kind of conceptual design that we are looking at IDC when we want to say and share the principle of what an intelligent digital workspace should be. What we are envisioning is a sort of environment where the individual is at the center. and he has universal access to what he needs to perform the activity. It might be application, it might be data, it might be the list of tasks that need to be accomplished, it might be the community he has to interact with. And all this is surrounded by a workspace infrastructure that is integrating and making easier to navigate, or even making not visible to the user what are the different applications that are used to perform it. Of course, this is all under a sort of super secure setup and infrastructure, and it's enabled by artificial intelligence and analytics that are basically not just helping in shaping the data and information, but also suggesting potential next best action to the employee. So that's a little bit the vision. If we move to the next slide, I would like to move from the space into the talent dimension. Talent is a very, very important element in today's society. And again, talent needs to be considered, once again, not just the digital talent or the data analyst. It's also talent for specialized workers and any kind of competence. And again, this is something that organizations across Europe, and you see the data from our survey, are finding very, very difficult to recruit. And this is true, as I say, that all the levels, and this is also related to the fact that our society, the working environment, the demand for new services and new business model, and it's keep on growing. So it's difficult to have and to keep the evolution of the talent that's needed. If we go to the next slide, I would like to trigger you a sort of mind changing. We always talk about people as resources, but I would like to suggest to change a little bit the perspective and talk about talent as a competitive advantage, because that is a little bit of consequences. Because if you think about resource, you think you have a sort of very corporation-centric type of approach. But that's not the right approach for the next normal we have to work in. And so if you think about talent as a competitive advantage, then you become more human-centered, more employee-centered. You rebalance the focus from the customer also to the employee. Of course, customer focus is paramount. It's super important. But we have to rebalance also the focus on the employee, because if you have unhappy employee, you can be sure that the customer satisfaction will not be as good as it could be. Then it has a consequence also in the logic of automation. So automation for productivity. No, automation and augmentation needs to be for productivity, but also to promote the customer engagement, the employee engagement, the capabilities, and so the retention of the precious skill that you are finding so difficult to recruit on the market. And then again is human that uses machine that transform into human and machine that are collaborating to ensure that the things are done in the best possible way, but also empowering the people. And that moves, of course, into disjointed talent pools, into integrated and diverse and reconfigurable teams. So that's a very important element. And if we go to the next slide, we can move to the third dimension, the dimension of trust. Now, trust is a very big topic, and having a culture of trust is something that we have learned also as a consequence of the COVID situation, where remote working became such an important way to basically grant business continuity. But we don't have the time to go through all the dimensions of trust, and one that I would like to pick up is the cybersecurity element, because we have been living in an environment that sometimes we think are secure, but maybe are not exactly as secure as they should. And what we are expecting for the future is a sort of change also in the attitude towards security. And here you can see one of our predictions that says that the workforce will have their own secure, portable, and private digital work identity, so that they can move across the different tools and data and business entities without boundaries, but always securing the right way of approaching to the information. In the next slide, you see the priorities, the IT security priorities that European organizations are considering when it comes to workspace transformation. And of course, you see data privacy, the prevention of data leakage, and so on and so forth. You can read the results yourself. But what I would like to stress is that all these things are absolutely important. There is the technical side and the orchestration side of trust and security that need to be absolutely pointed. But I think it's also important that we train people, employees, workers, in security technology and policy. And policies are not administrative procedures. There are habits, practices that we have to integrate in our way of performing. And I'm talking about good cyber hygiene habits. Like if you are used to we get used to wash our hands, I don't know, many times in the day. Well, now we have to also think about having a sort of hygiene habits when it comes to cyber or behavior when we are online. If we move to the next slide, I would like to then focus to the fourth dimension, the organizational dimension. And what we are expecting is that we will somehow put it under strong discussion, the typical hierarchical organization and the style of leadership we were used in the past. Again, fantastic. The Napoleonic structure was phenomenally effective and giving best possible results in an environment where the speed of change and the agility that was not the priority. But in the new environment, in the next normal, we think that we have to shift, and actually we are expecting company, as you can read on the slides, shifting from a more abandoning the static roles and shifting to processes that are dynamic, teams that are multidisciplinary, outcome focused more than activity focused. And this is absolutely important. If we go to the next slide, I would like to, again, the goal is not to go through all the details of what you can see in this slide, and you will have the material, of course. But what I would like to stress is the attention on the fact that there is a sort of combination and link between the culture, the creation of this agile team, and the tools and the technology that support the activity. This is very, very important. So if you want to have agile team, you also need to think about how to integrate collaboration tools with AI so that the model or the needs of swarming team can be even predicted and make it much easier to be achieved. And also the logic of learning needs to be different because it's not a static learning, it's a dynamic learning that is happening and is measured and is happening the moment is needed. So it's maybe micro type of learning that is what you need to do something in this moment. And you do it, you develop your skill, also enabled by new kind of training technologies, but also you measure your advancement. And so it's a completely different logic also in organizing the training path and the continuous learning that is needed in the company. Let's move to the next slide, because we are seeing those 4 dimensions. So let's say the workspaces, talent, the trust, and the element of the organization. But I want to reiterate that is really important if you want to transform and become more mature companies from a future of work perspective, to continue to focus on the employee experience. Because employee experience is the way not just to basically increase productivity, but it's also a way to increase loyalty and retention. And this translates into revenue growth, into better customer retention, in profitability, new customer acquisition, and so on and so forth, as you can see in the chart on the slide. And in order to focus on employee experience, we need to understand that also when you are using tools, the user experience is important. So we have to pay attention to that. We need to understand the personas that we have into the company. And of course, truly believe in what we want to achieve and show with from the top management throughout the entire organization the cultural change and manage the cultural change. If we move to the next slide, I would like to share with you also an element of coming from our Future Work survey that shows that, of course, people is rewarded and the employee experience is somehow, if you will, also related to the career opportunities, the salary, that's for granted. But if, as you can see from this chart, the number one most impactful initiative to drive employee experience in Europe is to really provide the right technology, the right tools to the people that have to perform the activity. This is a quite important element because sometimes we look at the soft part of the story, which is absolutely important. But let's not forget the other part, because you can see the frustration of someone that has to, again, to do a task, moving from whenever number of application, or is using things that are not working, and then you are maybe a customer and you're waiting, and the person is getting stressed because you are looking at him or her, and the entire experience is damaged. And so pay attention to all the dimensions: the physical, the cultural, the tools that you are providing, because this is helping really to create employee engagement. And I would like to conclude, if we move to the next slide, the presentation with a final element. We have described the four dimension, if you will, but one element that I think is so important when we are designing our strategy in creating new working experience, we have to work on three layers. We are used to talk about win-win. I want to introduce this concept of win-win-win. So we win 3 times. If we look at these 3 dimensions, so I focus to what matters to my employee, and I make these things very useful, because this is a very effective outcomes on the business side. And so I'm moving from the level of employees to the level of business. And if I do it right, and if I can also, as a company or an organization, make a sort of new purpose as a company, and for instance, socialize the experiences related to employability, and working together as a system, then we have a sort of third level, which is the social responsible one. And so we win 3 times: purpose, business, and employees. And with that, I would really like to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.